And we're going, I'm recording. So, hi,
Hello,
welcome. Thank you for coming to this interview. Please introduce yourselves.
my name is Bharat.
And I'm Erin.
Fantastic. And what brings you guys together in this interview? What are you guys working on?
So I'll give a bit of an introduction and then go into that. So
Please.
by background, I used to be a doctor, medical doctor, trained for a few years, quit that, went into academia. Academia was even worse, so I quit that. Worked a few product tech jobs, ended up working in Web3, and then I heard about DeSci about 2 years ago. And, my domain expertise was science. I love the movement and the things Web3 were doing, and these were merging. So I thought this makes sense for me to be. So I've been building in the space for about 2 years now. Started DeSci London, which is monthly meetup, events, conferences, co-working, etc. And that's been going on for 18 months. And then we've got a new project, which we'll talk about shortly.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Erin McGinnis. I've also been in DeSci for about 2 years and really kind of came into this space with original neuroscience background, then got into emerging tech opportunities and saw how much DeSci could really do for the established scientific system, aligned with a lot of the different ethos of convening people together in coordinated ways and aligning organizations as well as incentives to push science and impact forward. And that has taken me across a good number of different DeSci organizations, which I've been a contributor and core member of over the past couple of years. And I'm really excited to bring some of those different learnings to that next level, as well as invite new people, whether they're coming from that tech side, that science side, or that startup founder perspective into the ecosystem and movement of DeSci.
And what are you guys building at the moment? Do you have a brand, a name for what you're building?
Yeah, we're building Muse Matrix. It's a DeSci fellowship. So really kind of helping to amplify and accelerate some of these different conversations, as well as DeSci infrastructure and technology to really enable this next step forward in DeSci.
And what does that entail entirely? Like, are we talking about building a fellowship which is going to be similar to the longevity biotech fellowship, or are you guys going to be building businesses, DAOs, and other protocols? What are you focused on more than anything?
So to back up a small bit, we've been building DeSci London for the last 18 months, and we've got the largest IRL DeSci community. And the plan was, what can we use this community to actually do? Events is cool, but events isn't going to push the needle forward in terms of actually building out products and things for DeSci. So our idea was to find a bunch of talented scientists, find a bunch of talented Web3 developers, and give them space where they can cross-pollinate ideas, learn about each other's fields, and then work together on projects. We want the aim to be on infrastructure projects, so more core foundational level products. But the fellows are able to choose whatever they want to work on, whether they want to spin out a BioDAO, whether they want to do some open source software. But our kind of focus and what we think makes sense, having been in this system for 2 years, having a kind of map of everything and knowing where the gaps are, that there's definitely room for fairly foundational level infrastructure that needs to be built. And that's what we'd want people to focus on.
Do you have a specific foundational addition to the DeSci ecosystem that you believe must happen now? Anything that you're super excited to work on with your fellows?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Sure. You said that you're going to be building
Infrastructure, yeah.
So what type of infrastructure is missing at the moment that you're excited to work on as the first problem?
Do you want to take this? Do you want me to take this? I can take this. So there's a number of different things. There are some where people have already started doing things. So you have DeSci Labs doing their publication infrastructure. You've got LabDAO doing their computational biology. DeSci World have recently come out with their kind of proof of knowledge mechanism, which is a little bit complicated, but that, again, I think is core foundational infrastructure. I think there's probably a need for there to be almost a layer 2 specific to DeSci, where it's much more application specific and there are native things built into it, whether it's the ZK privacy side, whether it's some of the database or compliance with how you store data, those kind of things where for the user it's seamless and they don't need to worry about it. So it's already compliant with all the kind of FIRE, etc. regulations. So something that is easier than the current system but utilizes some of the DeSci infrastructure.
I'll add on that some of the different projects we're exploring and also inviting the different fellows to consider or supporting them in building out is from our own experiences, but also explored through all the different partners that we have as part of this whole matrix. And it's an entire ecosystem, and each of those different needs, whether they're also one of these organizations, maybe they're in more institutional, traditional science, maybe they're on the funding, investor side, or they're coming from this development background and see different applications. It's an open conversation as each of these projects are being defined further and further. This is one we see at that foundational level, but continue through other conversations as well as individual interest from investors that can also kind of direct what projects are built out. And that provides a lot more opportunities beyond just what we might mention in a given conversation.
Got it. Thank you. One thing that I want us to clarify and touch upon briefly is for people that might be learning about DeSci for the first time, I just want to understand your perspective about what DeSci is for you. What is decentralized science? Is it the same as the scope of a previous project here called Bio.xyz that was focused on DeSci, but not just all of DeSci, specific niche of DeSci, or is it more broader for you and your work with the fellows?
So DeSci is more the name of a movement standing on the shoulders of the open science movement and all of these incredible scientists and activists and people really pushing the world forward towards this impact that affects us every day in ways that we might not even recognize or acknowledge. And DeSci is bringing this new kind of variable into these conversations and equation of some of that technology and tooling that can really enable conversations that as an like scientific ecosystem we might have been having since forever. And by bringing that technology in to those conversations, as well as some of the mental shifts that you have to go through thinking about what does decentralization even mean? What does it mean to coordinate effectively and design for interoperability? Kind of reevaluate what different incentives are at play. That in and of itself, that mental shift and that social shift is what I'm personally really excited about in DeSci. And the decentralization, that technology really enables that or accelerates some of those possibilities. From a more personal level, I'm really interested in DeSci due to some medical complications I had, and the research in those domains wasn't prioritized, still isn't prioritized, yet there is this really profound community that is desperate for solutions to be found. And by taking these different coordination opportunities and having a decentralized approach, we might be able to more effectively make meaningful progress on each of our own daily lives. That's one example and can be applied to every other sector within science as well. So it's particularly powerful for the underfunded, under-supported, under-researched areas, which is the same conversation we have when we zoom out from a decentralization level, when we're thinking about DeFi and how that's really helping people that don't have as many of those financial kind of baseline infrastructure to support them in a successful way. DeSci is doing this same type of thing for science. And as many challenges as there are in finance, there are just as many, if not more, in science.
And this does impact millions of people around the world. Right?
Yes.
So, do you want to add something to this?
I think that was a very comprehensive comprehensive answer. Just to give my kind of 30-second TLDR that I say to someone else, they ask me what DeSci is. If you speak to any scientist and ask them, what are your pain points, what's wrong with science, they are going to list a number of different things. And I'm not going to list them all, but the quick ones are funding, how it's allocated and who it goes to, IP, lack of ownership, publishing, and kind of the list goes on. And DeSci is using Web3, which gives us some ability to have building blocks like Lego block tooling that you can use to run experiments, experimenting with IP, experiment with new structures of organization, experiment with a bunch of things from the bottom up, trying to restructure science. So it's many people working on many different things, but all of these are pain points, and you are seeing a massive exodus of young academics from science. I've left, Erin's left, and I meet a bunch of people who have had a previous science degree but now work in something completely unrelated. So there's a massive problem with science, and there's many different pain points that need to be solved. And I think we finally have some kind of tooling and mechanism that is going to able for this to be like a scientific revolution. Open science was poised to do that, but there was no real way of coordinating people's incentives or nothing that really gave, a transfer of power. When you talk about decentralization, it's about who has the power, who has the buy-in, who has a voice here. And this is the element that DeSci adds. We're using the Web3 stuff.
Fantastic. So I have a couple of questions that have emerged in our conversation. I want to understand pragmatically when you guys are starting with your work, how would that look like for scientists that want to facilitate the research through the infrastructure that you're building? So practically, how does that look like? Are you guys going to be in London? Are you going to be global?
So we start kind of end of March is when applications will open. It'll be a 6-month program, and we want 20 fellows, 10 scientists, and 10 Web3 developers. The plan for the first cohort is that one will be IRL based in London, which utilizes the community we've already built, and then another one which will be remote only. And one of the things we're kind of testing is which one is going to lead to a team that actually builds something. Is it going to be the IRL one, or is it going to be the online one? My personal bet is that the IRL nature is very important for cross-pollinating ideas, kind of meeting someone just randomly when you're having lunch together, and then talking in a more relaxed manner. And I think that's going to be important, but we're going to test that. So applications open end of March. The program probably kick off kind of mid-April to June time, and it'll be 6 months long. 2 months will be teaching, and then 4 months will be spent hacking.
Got it. And does this come with financing or competitions for financing afterwards in the end?
We're working on that. Really, we want people to be paid at least, a moderate stipend, because to incentivize people to actually do something, there needs to be usually some kind of economic either opportunity to exit at the end or something from the beginning. I think one thing that we're probably going to be able to get in process is have sort of prizes by various organizations like Polygon or something like that has interest in DeSci. So if you build something on that, then there's a prize at the end. So that's probably going to be how it works. But I would love to compensate at least bare minimum kind of travel, food, and things like this.
You want to add anything else to this, or I think it was pretty comprehensive, right? And now is my second question, right? We are IRL here in Roatan, in the Prospera Zede, which is a very unique place. It's gorgeous. What is the value for you for Vitalia and Prospera? And what brought you guys here, right? I mean, do you believe there is a future of what's happening here for the DeSci movement? Do you see them as a integral cog, or do you just see them as a distraction that might take away from the research happening in labs in big cities? There are dividing perspectives. I just want to get yours. It doesn't have to be black or white.
I can give a quick one and then I'll pass it over to you. So, the whole point of this DeSci movement is trying to improve the way science is done. And the whole DeSci thesis is that, it's going to be very Web3 related. What they're doing here in Vitalia is improving science and doesn't even necessarily need the Web3 element. The regulatory arbitrage, meaning you can do a clinical trial here for a lot cheaper and quicker, is one of the most disruptive things in science I've seen for a long time. That's 10 to 100x improvement on the current system, and that was just by going to another location. So you add that, then you can add some of the BioDAO elements on top of it that DeSci does, and I think you've got something extremely powerful. So I think Vitalia even without DeSci, is shifting the needle forward, and with DeSci it could potentially be turbo-powered.
Tying back to something you mentioned earlier, being at Vitalia is this cross-pollination of different ideas, of different people, of different perspectives from all over the world. And that's a similar ability or opportunity that DeSci provides. I was having a conversation with Lawrence and Nicholas earlier today and asked a similar question, and Lawrence's immediate reaction was, Vitalia is DeSci. Like, DeSci is an expression of that, can be Vitalia. DeSci can become all of these different things, or at least be an element of it. And kind of that application into different domains can have really powerful opportunities, such as where regulatory options kind of come into play that applied into a scientific domain paired with some of these different technological infrastructure or social movement mindsets is really kind of can have this compounding effect, like you were mentioning.
Fantastic. The second to last question is the most important one in my mind, right? And you did touch upon this in your description of DeSci and what you're building. But I want the people to understand why you're doing what you're doing. You could be doctors, you could be academics getting paid to do research in large institutions. You have these opportunities. You chose to be here, which is lovely, but here in a philosophical point of view, in an operational point of view, in a niche that hasn't gotten the funding it needs yet. So why are you doing this? Why is this important for you?
Yeah, so originally I was planning to become an MD PhD, really interested in this intersection of medical providers and researchers, and pairing that with patients' perspectives, and having all of those perspectives in one place, weighted in a meaningful type of way, doesn't happen very often in the current system, or it doesn't happen effectively. And while on that path, I finished undergrad and was on gap year before medical school, realized I had 15 more years of schooling on top before I would actually be in a position to construct systems that might enable better coordination and collaboration across these providers, these scientists and researchers, and the people it affects, those patients that really kind of have that downstream impact of what they're doing in their professions. And I realized 15 years of schooling to not want to wear a white coat all day, whether treating patients or in a lab, wasn't the most effective path to achieve that. So I pivoted into exploring what might this look like from a private startup perspective, got into a health tech startup, and then found my way kind of weaving between different opportunities the modern era provides, heavily leaning into emerging technologies, just continuing to be at that front edge. Started working in Web3 on an NFT AR side of it, and saw this eventual application to science. And I knew I wanted to understand this technology and be part of that movement whenever it started popping up. And then DeSci started becoming a conversation, and we had a word for this concept that so many of us have been thinking about for years and years and years, and so desperately need and see this vision of what it can provide, both often at that personal type of level, or maybe it's affecting someone in our family, someone in our community, and we can't not be a part of that. That's why I'm in it.
I'll keep mine brief. It was the amount of nonsense that I saw when I was in research and academia. Give an example, when I was working on my master's on chronic fatigue syndrome patients, it took us 18 months to get ethical approval when all we were collecting was blood and stool from patients that desperately wanted to give it to us. But this barrier, which has to be there for the safety reasons, was way too slow. And that to me was enough that like I'm not going to engage with the system. I used to even joke that I wanted to like hire a ship and go into international waters and then we can do whatever research we want, and then kind of ended up in Vitalia, which is not a million miles away from that. Yes, it was just how poorly functional and how the design of it was not how you would design it from the beginning, but nobody seemed to be working on trying to kind of, completely sort it out. I don't know. It was, you had both that, the delays, and then you had other things like, I got offered to do a PhD and it was on a stipend of a wage, and then you've got no ownership on anything that you build out. So that's no different to asking someone, do you want to work at this startup? You're going to get paid a small startup wage, and if it works, the startup does really well, you get nothing. Like, no one's going to take that deal, but this is the norm in science. And then it had so many problems that I kind of got just a bit sick of everything related to it. So I went and actually did some non-medical, non-science stuff for a little while. I did some fintech stuff, I did some digital fashion stuff for a little while, and then I kind of come back to science, a little bit recharged. And then I think that's the main thing driving me, just wanting to rid science of nonsense.
Fantastic. Thank you. So last question, again, very important. If people want to support you in your new endeavor, how do they do so? Where do you need help? And how can people help you? How can they find more about you? What do we have to share to them to find you?
So a number of different ways. If you are a scientist and you want to, you're interested in DeSci, you want to help move the needle forward, then sign up and apply when the applications open. Similarly, if you're a Web3 developer, this is one of the things that the space is missing the most. Anyone with the technical blockchain understanding, you might be a Web3 developer and you're interested in science, but you don't know how to contribute. This is the exact place where you should be. So that's, if you want to work as a fellow, if you want to mentor someone, so you've got some useful skills, but you think, okay, I can only contribute an hour a month once, that's enough. Like, that would be of value to the fellows that run through us. So if you've got any skill set in anything related to DeSci, anything in Web3, and you just like to mentor some people, that would also be amazing. And also anyone who are open to grants, kind of send you the deck if that's of interest.
Yeah, just kind of a broad invitation to anyone who is even casually interested in being part of the conversation about DeSci or contributing to it. Please reach out. And for organizations, especially those that might have some type of technical platform or be interested in having a vested interest in what the future of science and DeSci might be able to achieve, we'd love to help bridge you into these opportunities or be a place where we can help facilitate some of those different visions into coming into reality.
Fantastic. Just for clarity, for people that want to support you through mentorship, what sectors of mentorship do you look for? Is it financials? I know it's a lot of things, right? So is it financial planning and modeling? Is that part of it? No, right? You look for more scientific people. Perhaps I'm wrong. Please correct me.
Most of the initial educational piece of the fellowship is focused on scientific foundations, just understanding how the science system works, as well as understanding technical concepts like how blockchain works, and then more advanced things like CK proofs and how AI ties into that conversation. So skill sets or experience in either of those domains is really valuable, just to be able to have those real lived experiences. And then a good majority of the rest of the curriculum is focused on, okay, how do these things apply to DeSci? What does that look like now? What could that look like? So especially people in the DeSci ecosystem, but that can also be extended to people in academia who are writing research papers on what this might look like and have spent a fair amount of time thinking on it, but might not have considered themselves part of the DeSci ecosystem previously. So the invitation is a bit broad, and if you think you might have valuable skill sets, you probably do, so we'd love to connect.
Fantastic. And your website would be?
MuseMatrix.xyz.
Fantastic. Any last remarks, any last thoughts you would like to share?
There's a huge opportunity in DeSci for people from all different types of backgrounds and abilities, and this movement will really impact each one of us, as well as have a much larger impact across the world. So if that feels aligned, we'd love to have you be part of just the broader ecosystem, thinking about what this future state could look like.
Fantastic. Anything from you?
Science is overdue a revolution, and we think it's here.
Fantastic. Well, Erin and Bharat, thank you so much for the interview, and best of success with your next steps.
Thanks.